Welcome back to my channel, everyone. 3 tips here. I had a little bit of cement silver that I wanted to melt into a button, so I put it in this melt dish. You'll notice that there's some molten dots of silver down on the bottom of the dish, but they will not flow together. Also, around the inside edges of the dish are tiny droplets of silver that are clinging to the inside of that dish, and I can't get them to move down into the bottom center part of the dish with the rest of the silver. So here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to throw a pinch of borax on there. And that borax, what that does is that causes those little dots to flow down off of that edge and coagulate or collect down in the bottom of the melt dish. This is regular grocery store borax, 20 mule team borax from the grocery store. And the little dots of silver, they accumulate around the inside top edge of that melt dish. When I'm melting larger quantities of silver, got to use a little extra heat to keep the metal molten in a large mass down in the bottom of that dish. And what happens is when you get it hot like that, some of it tends to vaporize off and go up in smoke. And the upper outer edges inside the melt dish are cooler than the molten mass down in the bottom of the melt dish. And so what happens as the silver vaporizes off, it tends to condense and form them little bitty beads of molten silver up around the inside edges of that melt dish. Here you can see the flux. Once I add it, those little dots, they just flow beautifully down into the bottom of the melt dish, and everything collects down there in the center bottom of the melt dish. Here I'm using a pair of pliers, and I turn the melt dish, and I go around the entire outside rim of the dish, adding fairly generous portions of borax. After I get it real hot. It's important to get the melt dish hot before we apply the borax, because then it tends to stick where I need it to stick. And then once we melt it, by directing the flame onto the borax that we've already added, it'll melt, and then it carries those tiny dots of silver down into a central mass in the bottom of that melt dish, like magic. The word flux means flow. So when we add the borax to the hot melt dish, it creates some sort of coefficient that allows those tiny balls of silver that are clinging to the inside edge of the melt dish, it allows them to just kind of roll off, just like if we're using a jet of water to wash it down off the inside of the melt dish. And also notice down in the bottom, the silver has collected together. Again, flux means flow. So the molten metal has been allowed to flow together down there into a central mass. And that's what we're trying to do. Here in a minute, you'll see I'll, right there, using the pliers to tilt the melt dish and move the large molten bead of silver around to collect up all the other little smaller beads that have resisted flowing into that central mass. Now we've got everything into a single bead there. I'm going to add some borax as it freezes. And what that does is that just keeps the oxygen off of there, or the air off of there as it freezes. And once we get it solid enough, I'll reach in here with a pair of tweezers, metal tweezers. We'll pluck it out of there and quench it in a metal container of water. Here's our little bead of silver, and it's got flux on it. We get that on there with a little bit of dilute sulfuric. Here's our melt dish. Notice that all of the tiny beads of silver that were clinging to the inside of it are now gone, and they're in the bead that we melted. This will conclude the video. Thank you for watching.